Come with us to a land down under as we clock in with Men at Work's incredible debut album, Business as Usual. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast, a music episode. How can you tell?
Well, it's just me and Dean. Just the two of us.
Just the two
Don't you like this little intimate moments?
We don't have Grover Washington introing us, though.
Yeah, I think that's
of Grover Washington Jr.
It's like, I think we've made the comment already that it's the music side of it is always easier to talk about. It's just you and me. You know, we like having those conversations. And I think 5 people talking about an album, it would probably tend to get a little tedious, I would think.
And you know what? I don't want anybody's opinion on Jeff Lynne. No one's gonna give me their opinion on it. So
people tend to be, I think, a little bit more, perhaps a little bit more passionate when it comes to music, I think. So So
I think movies are easy to talk about in a group because there's a certain baseline level. And the music episodes we do are really particular. Even though they're universal, these are universal albums and things that are much beloved, but the experiences are usually particular to us. And that's why.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was the original nucleus for joining. So if this is your first episode, there's a lot to check out of music, movies, little shorter tidbits, top 5s. There's a whole treasure trove of material that you can go back and check out. And we thank you for joining us. If this is your first time checking us out, welcome aboard to the 3324 podcast, where we talk about the music and movies that shaped our lives. And like I said, these are usually universal themes that we touch upon, but particular to us. And there's probably particular stories about the things we talk about to other people too, right? We always know that.
Sure.
It means something. Everybody connects to music and film in a different way, but it's universally connectable.
The hope is that I think there's a relatability to what we talk about. So I think people will respond to it.
And we're relatable people.
Yeah, well.
We're not related, but we're relatable people.
Indeed. And we have...
Although you go far enough back into the timeline, we are related. We're all related. Okay. If you go all the way back, but we're not. This is not a paleontology class or a podcast, and so we're gonna leave that to the scientists, and we're gonna talk today. We're talking about Men at Work.
Yes.
And I sprung this on Eric because usually we've got some things planned out, and we've got we've got the ability now when we have a lot of episodes pre-recorded, we kind of have the ability to kind of freestyle. We don't have to really be as rigid. We can kind of come up with stuff. So last week I said, hey, Men at Work, business as usual. And he's like, yeah.
Yeah, it took a minute.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
It did take a minute. And we'll get into it, of course, as to why I probably took a minute. But let's get into the stats and
let's do that part. Let's get the it's not even technical information, but let's get the statistical information out of the way. Interesting first stat. Usually we talk about when things were released. This was released in the US in April of 1982, but it was released in Australia because it's an Australian band. Was actually released 6 months earlier in November of 1981. So there's a little bit of a story there, but for our purposes, for us, it came to our shores in April of 1982. There were 3 singles released. Who Can It Be Now went to number 1. Down Under was certainly not Down Under. It was number 1. Be Good Johnny did not chart on the top 200 chart, but it was on a pop track or some sub chart, but it didn't chart on the main chart. Produced by Peter McIan, hit number 1 on Billboard for an unprecedented 15 weeks. 15 weeks. That's 1 week shy of 4 months that this Australian band virtually came out of nowhere and grabbed grabbed the American audiences in a really quirky and interesting way. And it went 6 times platinum, so it's in excess of 6 million copies, and they won a Grammy for Best New Artist in 1983, which was well deserved. So, as much as there's a lot of great statistical information here, this band would flame out pretty quick, unfortunately. So,
indeed, yeah. Which is a shame.
I was thinking, do you know what my first concert? You know what the first concert I ever saw was?
What's that?
Fleetwood Mac, right?
Fleetwood Mac.
They opened from 1982 on the Mirage Tour, September 14th in the Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey.
Okay.
So yeah, Fleetwood Mac was my first concert, but Fleetwood Mac was not the first band I've ever seen on stage. Men at Work was the opening act. So actually, Men at Work have the distinction of the very first band that I ever saw live was actually Men at Work.
That's a nice story.
They were the opener for Fleetwood Mac.
That's a great story.
And that was in September of that year. And this album had just come out in April. So I think Who Could It Be Now? Down Under wasn't, I don't even think, a hit yet. And Who Could It Be Now was kind of bubbling under. That was it. And then they played Who Could It Be Now last? Because they had one hit at the time or one thing.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You were, I remember you were really loving this band, especially Colin Hay, lead singer. You were always commenting on his voice and just just loving. Embarrassingly for me, my experience is I didn't even own the album. So when you said let's do the album, I'm like, holy shit, I don't know this album.
You never had I thought you had it on cassette or something.
Nope, never.
Really?
The only time I ever heard it was in your car.
Why didn't you say anything to me?
I don't know. No, but but you know what?
Instead, we're going to do Billy Idol.
No. Hey, hey, this is what it's about, though, man. I mean, I went back and I listened, and I love it, and it's great. And of course, the hits, and they were so huge.
Yeah.
But I'm listening to the album, and I'm like, did I even hear this in Dean's car? Because I don't remember any of these songs, like any of the other tracks.
Well, and
it's just nothing came to mind, like nothing. And I usually have a pretty good recollection, with that kind of stuff. And it just. Well,
you remember Be Good Johnny, right?
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
So the three singles, sure.
Okay.
And of course, our friend Johnny always got he was the butt of the joke on that one.
Because.
Be good.
Now, so before we went on, you had said to me, "Oh, this is going to be very interesting." So what?
Yeah.
What is it? What did you come away? See, I'm sorry. I had just assumed that you had not even had it on cassette or something.
That's the weird thing. It's like, but I drew a total blank when you mentioned it, and it's like, yeah, I know that. Of course I know the hits.
I remember that one.
And I'm like, and I
remember your look.
I know this album, and I'm like, maybe I'm sorry, but I but it. Hey, I'm willing to listen to anything at this point. Okay. Go back, and we're but it's wow. I'm kind of embarrassed right now because I'm just like, I can't believe I don't know this record.
Well, now you know how I felt with So.
Okay. That's fair.
How you're feeling right now is how I felt when we did the Peter Gabriel episode. I was embarrassed that I knew Red Rain and I knew Sledgehammer and I knew Don't Give Up, but that was it.
And you know what? I don't think it. And there's going to be I'm sure there's probably plenty more out there that hopefully that this will happen again. And because I love the experience of listening to something that I'm not familiar with.
Cool.
The 80s seemed to be, that was never the case. Like we talk about the 90s all the time being like a lot of this music passed me by and that, because that was my choice. Here it's like, you hear this stuff on the radio, so you immediately think, got to get that record.
Yeah, and I thought you were into them as well.
I was
meaning
the hits, but I guess those hits were just so big and so like it just didn't even occur to me that I didn't even need to have the album because I know you had it, and I know Johnny, our friend Johnny, had it, and there it was. So it's just one of those things.
The one that got away.
Yeah, pretty much. And I think the most interesting aspect, and what I take away from it, is the fact of how self-aware they were about where they came from. The Down Under was just such a tongue in cheek, almost a parody on Australia, and I find that so funny because there was so many Australian bands of the '80s when you think about it. And not including like AC/DC and bands like that.
In Excess, Ice House.
Yeah.
There was
Midnight Oil was another
Midnight
one.
Oil.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on. Yeah.
Yep.
And all right, before we get into it, let me just do a quick brief history. They were formed in 1978 in Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
We got to go through I think it's important to go through the group members. Because of my experience with re-listening to this album. So you've got Colin Hay on lead vocals and guitar, Ron Strikert on lead guitar, Jerry Spicer on drums, Greg Ham on flute, sax, and keyboards, and then John Rees on bass. These guys are virtually unknown. Everybody pretty much, if you were around in the 80s and watched the music videos, you remember Colin Hay because he kind of had the lazy eye, very unique looking individual. And the Down Under video, and then kind of making fun of that, and who could it be now? And when I listen to this album now, first of all, I fucking love this album. It's fun. I listened to it not with my 1982 ears, but I listened to it now, and actually, I think the 3 singles are probably the weakest songs on the album because they're so gimmicky, because they're so like. That's why it's easy to pigeonhole like Men at Work. Like you said, it's like, they're quirky and they're really like leaning into the Australian thing. And it's like, they do, but the gold is in the other songs.
Okay.
For in listening to this, I'm like, wow, the musicianship on this album.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The kind of the arrangements that they went for, and the non-single, the singles are very novelty. Down Under is very much a novelty song.
Yeah, no doubt.
So this could have really, this really could have bit them in the rear end. Because when you have that novelty thing, then you become that thing.
Yeah,
you become known for that, and it's hard to get out of that box. And their follow-up album, Cargo, they did a pretty good job with they had It's a Mistake, Overkill. Mm-hmm. Dr. Heckle and Mr. Jive. So they were able to kind of battle out of it. But, based on this first album, it could have been a novelty from all these guys are Australian, and it could have been a passing thing.
I wonder.
What did you think? What were your...
Well, I wondered, when I agree with you. There are several songs on this that are just brilliant. And again, like you say, the musicianship, and it reminds me of so many bands, like even now, like or in the 90s, like I think of bands like Bare Naked Ladies and Mighty Mighty Boss Tones and things like that. They're these like quirky bands, but they're such great players in these bands. Like and this and man, the just like you always admired Colin Hay's voice, but the other guy, he's just like the keyboardist, saxophone, the flutist. I mean, it's such a unfortunately, he's no longer with us, But
Greg Ham passed away in 2012. There's a bit of a story. There's a bit of a story behind that, but these guys were just. It's one of those things. I think that what caught me about this album is how tight they sounded.
Yeah.
And how rock like. For a pop album, there's a lot of rock textures on here, and a lot of the songs really kind of go for they really skirt the line between really smart, easy, listenable pop. This album's only 38 minutes long, so everybody, please, I beg you, go listen to this album. There was not a misstep on this album. Even if you don't know this album, this is again, I listened to it like 5 times. I became obsessed with this album.
And if you do know it, listen to it again, because
listen to it with new ears.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because that's what I brought from this is like I knew all the songs, but when you listen to it and you start to kind of pick out, like Catch a Star, the very last song. It's like 6 minutes long.
That's one of my favorites. Yeah.
And they just settle into a like the song settles into this groove.
Yeah.
That they never leave, and then you got the bass and the guitar doubling lines, like they really kind of went for some stuff, and that's why I'm saying like you think Down Under, this is going to be a goofy album.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a straight ahead like pop rock really well constructed album that, again, I found wanting to get to, like songs like Underground
Mm-hmm.
and Touching the Untouchables, and people just love to play with, like, all these other non-cuts are
Yeah.
fucking this is almost like we did our In Excess episode, oddly enough, an Australian band, right? And they said with Kick they wanted every song to be possibly a single. I think with the exception of maybe one song on Business as Usual, every one of these could have been a single, either on pop
Yeah.
radio or like a rock station, like, you know.
I'm curious to know how many people though bought the album just for the singles.
Oh, absolutely. I did.
And did they just listen to those singles and not bother? And again, we urge you to really give another listen if you haven't, because it's just really great. I'm not surprised, or I am surprised that in 2010 they got sued, right?
Yeah.
In Sydney, because they were allegedly they plagiarized the flute riff from an old, I guess it's a kookaburra sits in the old gum tree. It's like
a scouting song, like
Australian folk song type of thing. Yeah,
like campouts and stuff like that from 1932.
But that's what I thought it was. So I'm actually quite surprised that they, I guess they said, well, we wrote this, and I thought it was based on an old folk tune. They used that riff, and maybe they got permission to do it. But being the fact that it's kind of a tongue in cheek song, kind of almost making fun or poking fun of Australia, and do you know
how that came to light? Do you know how they discovered this? Because what you just said, it was 2010.
Yeah.
So that's almost 30 years after the song was released. So for 30 years,
no
one in Australia had ever picked up on this until there was an Australian quiz show, and they played the riff.
Oh,
and it's like one of those, and they said to like the panel, it's like celebrities or whatever, like, what is this thing originally based on?
Yeah.
And one of the, it's almost like a multiple choice thing. So one of the choices was Kookaburra sits under the old gum tree, and one of the panelists said, yeah, it's that.
Mm-hmm.
Until then, nobody had ever said anything.
Wow.
No one had ever said anything about a similarity. Then all of a sudden in 2010 or 2009, whenever the quiz show aired, the original rights holder got involved and said, well, you took it. And Greg Ham was like, the flute player was like, he goes, I didn't do it. If I did it, I didn't do it on purpose. I was just riffing. And the thing with Kookaburra sits in the old gum tree is it's a campfire song. So it's a very short song.
Yeah.
So that riff is a substantial part of that song.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's not like that song was like a 20-minute song and this was one part of it. And they could say, well, it's not, you didn't substantially take it.
Yeah.
But since that song is so short, they said, well, you've taken a substantial part of that song. So they did find, I think that I forgot what the rights holder was asking for, like 25% or 50%. And the court said 5% for you, and you'll get a little after that. And then Greg Ham would pass away 2 years later. And they were saying that, you know what, part of it was like might've been the stress, and he was heartbroken. He was actually embarrassed about it because it wasn't anything intentional. It was just, what do they call? I forget what they call it. When two stand-up comedians come up with the same joke, but they've never heard the other person do it, I forget what it's called.
Yeah,
where you could think of the same type of thing, never having heard someone do a joke, and they say, "Oh, you stole it." It's like, no, I've never even seen that act before.
Yeah,
it's that.
And
same
it happens all the time.
And it could have been in the back of his mind. It certainly could have been there. But for 30 years, nobody said boo about it until this quiz show said, "What does this sound? What does this song sound like?" And then all of a sudden, the lawsuits went flying. So really strange story about that, right?
Yeah, but it's like, but that's the thing though. In music, it's you think, well, even if they did do it on purpose, I mean, obviously you got to get permission and all this kind of thing. But it's like, I think it's if in a perfect world, it would be, use it. That's Australia. That's you're using a piece of our. Take it and run with it. And
single-handedly promoted Australian tourism.
And there you go. That's right. So
they were pretty much the ambassadors,
Yeah.
Except for Colin Hay, though. Colin Hay is an interesting character because he's actually born in Scotland.
Yeah.
So he's of Scottish descent. Then when he was 14, his family moved to Australia. So by the time this album came around, he's probably around 28 or close to 30. So he had spent half of his life.
he has that vocal tone.
It comes through a little.
It comes through. There's almost, dare I say, I mean, there's a little bit of Peter Gabriel in his voice, that clear resonance that comes out of that sort of high pitch, which I love.
I could see on Down by the Sea, I could absolutely hear that, because he gets to stretch his vocal chops a little bit on that song, because it's so it's atmospheric.
Yeah.
It's got those elements of something that would make a good comparison to something like Gabriel. But God, I couldn't, I listened to this and I'm like, I can't believe that I'm really picking up on the musicianship now, and not just playing it through because I know it, and you listen and you kind of half listen to it because I'm going to listen to this, and because you remember it, so you know what's coming, and you just kind of you listen through it, but you don't listen to it, right? You listen through the album, you go through it, but you don't really listen to it.
Well, that was my experience. I was like, I don't recognize this. I'm going to give this a listen. This is catchy. I like this. I like this even better. I like that even more, Oh. So yeah, it was,
gem after gem.
It was a pleasure, an absolute pleasure. And I was like, thank you for suggesting this one. Because I was, I think here I'm thinking, the 80s, we're talking, but it's nice that we're talking about something other than the hits, which has always been my thing. There's always a better song. There's always the deeper cuts for me. It's like I'm trying to look for something.
It's rare that I say that though. You will go there. You'll be like, this wasn't the great.
Right.
I'm playing this thing by the second listen. I'm like, you know what? The hits don't do justice to what Men at Work was really doing.
Yeah.
Like the hits are great. They're friends. I'm not diminishing the hits, but the other stuff is that much better for me, especially because it bridges that. Since we're talking 81, 82, it's not that totally electronic 80s that was on the horizon. No. They were using keyboards, but they were also using saxophone. I forget what the song is. I think it's Touching the Untouchables.
Okay.
And it's got that guitar riff. It's like diddle it, diddle it, diddle it, diddle it, diddle it.
Yes.
And that last three notes is the saxophone. Like the saxophone picks up the last three notes of the guitar riff on Touching the Untouchables.
That would have to be guitar, because Streichert is his co-writer on that.
Yeah, Ron Streichert. And I'm like, this is brilliant. But if you're listening through it and not listening to it, you're going to kind of just
miss all those.
Yeah, you're going to miss the nuance. Exactly. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
And this album is so full of that, and that's what it is the singles are so big. Who Can It Be Now is an 80s classic. And, Down Under, of course, we've already beaten that into the ground. But, Underground, forget it. Jerry Spicer's drumming on this is just, I love it. He uses like a weird crash.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like he's hitting a tin can, like in his kit. It seems like that's part of his kit.
Yeah.
It's got like that.
It's like a toy drum set. Yeah.
His fills on Down Under are very underrated. You're so used to listening to Down Under, but his fills at the end, rock solid stuff, these guys and John Rees on bass. I mean, these guys were just a really tight
that's
combo.
The essence of, like I always say, that's the essence of doing something more in a pop song, or just pushing those boundaries. And I wish, more people would appreciate that in terms of like, we do it because we would just love music in a probably more profound way. A lot of people do, but it's like, how many people are really talking about an album like this as opposed to like the Beatles or
of course,
all the the audio files are going to be talking about the big groups and such. But with an album like this, that you can totally appreciate and is totally underrated in terms of just some great players and it's the genres too, like new wave, reggae, rock, pop rock for sure, but but yeah, I could see the new wave aspect. I could see.
I could say the reggae is catch a star.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Has that reggae. The original version of Down Under, which they recorded in 1980, was actually more of a reggae influenced song. It didn't resemble what the current version is. It didn't have it didn't have that riff in the beginning, the Kookaburra riff, and it was very much a reggae song, almost more Police, like like how Police were doing that kind of reggae stuff in the late 70s, like that. Like that type of thing.
Yeah, I could probably
see
that. I would love, I know
it's on
there's a re-release, I guess, with bonus tracks. And I mean, yeah, it's just what a pleasure. Nice,
yeah.
nice surprise for me. I mean, like I said,
Yeah, and like I said, I love being able to rediscover something and get something new out of it. So for me, it actually caught me off guard that I'm like, wow, I got to listen to this again. I like, how could I have missed all this stuff? And this was an album that I had gotten when it came out in
Well, that's the thing.
'82.
It's like many a night
a
working
cassette.
in Jimmy's restaurant in Dobbs Ferry. Johnny would bring his, working in the, we were dishwashers, and
Yeah.
he used to bring his boom box in, and he would have like the whole thing of tapes, and this was definitely one of them. And I'm sure, at some point, how did I not remember this stuff?
I'm sorry to spring that trap on you. Kind of.
No,
I do remember the look on your face. I'm like, well, what did I say? what did I do? I'm sorry. I didn't know.
Yeah, it took me off. It just completely took me off guard. And I mean, I'm not surprised that you picked, because you did love this record back in the day. At least the songs, like every time, But this is probably one of those cases for me. It was like definitely one of those cases of setting up my boombox in the kitchen, pressing the pause button, waiting for the song to come on the radio so I could record it, and make it my own mixtape.
If we're talking '82, though, you were knee deep in Abacab.
I was deep. Well, that was getting in heavily into prog, and
so you were definitely kind of You were swimming in different waters, admittedly, right? Admittedly, so you were really kind of getting. I was veering towards this kind of stuff, this more quirky.
Well,
this is kind of like the quirky pop that that I'm known for. Like
you always love pop music is your forte. That is your But what I always loved about your taste in pop, it's not just the mainstream pop hits of the day, as it was more the experimental pop, and one thing led to another. So for me, that's great, because it is a form of prog. It is a form of, because like I said, they're always trying something new and different. Bands like the Police were always great for me in that aspect. And even the Clash, they're supposed to be punk, always doing something vastly different than just playing three chords. There's always a little bit of reggae, expanding the horizons and the ideas. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. And with Men at Work, here's what, this is kind of what bothers me, right? Is so they became a worldwide sensation with this album. They played at Live Aid. I mean, it became like Men at Work was like the rising stars.
Yeah.
And they released Cargo, which was a fantastic album. I think it hit number 2 or number 3. Didn't go to number 1, but again, these guys were made for. Remember that video for "It's a Mistake"?
Yeah.
When they're like pretending to be army men, like they were tailor made for MTV, because they kind of played on their, they played on the Australian thing, but they were also quirky and they were fun to watch.
Well, they had the look too.
Yeah.
They all had that look, the perfect.
Just a quirky band.
Just the right look. Yeah. They all some of them were like really thin, and they had the, like as you say, Colin Hay had that interesting feature with his eye.
So it was just kind of
that became sort of a gimmick in itself, Yeah,
and it's like, this is interesting to watch. Yeah. So in 1984, Jerry Spicer, the drummer, and John Reeser are let go. They don't leave; they're let go, which to me means fired. Like Colin Hay says, "We don't need your services anymore." Okay. So then they go to work on their third album, which was called Two Hearts. Before the sessions end for that album, Ron Stryker leaves in 1985 because he was concerned about letting the rhythm section go. He didn't feel like this was, something was missing, So he left in 1985, and what I think this is my opinion, is that, I think Colin Hay started to really reach in there and try and become like the one-man band and really kind of assert control over it. And I don't think Men at Work needed that. I don't think that's what Men at Work needed.
No, definitely not.
What I was thinking when I was driving and listening to it, I was trying to think of a comparison. The closest I could come to was Men at Work should have functioned like a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers for Colin Hay. Like he could have taken over, and been the, asserted control, but have the respect or to keep the band, and keep Men at Work as a viable concern, viable music concern.
Yeah.
This is my opinion. I think that this is what happened. Is he kind of went for, and was making changes, but you didn't need to fix anything. They weren't liabilities. That rhythm section was great. John Reese, where'd this guy come from? He's a really good bass player.
Yeah. Yeah.
And together the five of them made a really nice combo, a really nice tight outfit. That they got the job done, and yeah, there was, it's Colin Hay wrote most of the stuff on here, but Ron Streicher, his stuff is no slouch. The stuff that he wrote, Greg Ham wrote "Helpless Automaton," which is kind of the quirkiest, most electronic song.
Yeah,
but it's not like they were all trying to fight for stuff. Yeah, Colin Hay was the main guy, but the other guys, contributions were good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can't find anything out about this. Like, there's nothing on their Wikipedia about like the demise of it. It's just kind of, they were told their services were no longer needed. And then Ron, by the next album, Ron Streicher's like, I'm leaving. I'm leaving because I'm not comfortable with this. So something happened there. There was some type of dynamic that changed, or and who's the last man standing? Well, Colin Hay's the only guy left in the band. So you kind of have to think, well, who was it then?
Yeah.
That was making these changes.
Sounds like Colin Hay was trying to become Sting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
and maybe that was too much too soon. Right. And cause he, after that Men at Work was done and he started on a solo career, which went, for all intents and purposes, nothing against Colin Hay, went nowhere.
Yeah.
He put out his first solo album, had that song "Hold Me," When You're Lonely, and then after that it was just nothings, just really a string of nothings. So I think he probably reached for the brass ring a little too early. I think Men at Work could have been a project that he cultivated, and even maybe did solo work as a side thing. But he seemed to. This is me again. This is all speculation. It seems to me that he seemed to have felt that he didn't need the rest of the band. That Men at Work didn't define what was that they weren't defining what it was that he was.
That seems to be.
And
the case.
I beg to differ on this album.
No, I totally agree. And that it speaks to many contributions that even though you're not a principal songwriter, you still can't discount your ability.
Yeah, your guitar playing.
If I were all I could do is sing or play guitar, maybe strum a few chords on a guitar, I need a band. I need a solid band behind me. I need something that I can, work off of and be inspired by. And that's, that seems to be what I'm into, is the collaborative spirit of a band. And it's a shame that there's a lot of bands out there that are just, that have that kind of dynamic, that this, the front man becomes like too good for, he
doesn't seem like that person. Like, if you see interviews, he seems very humble. But again, behind the scenes, we don't know. And
who knows?
I think Greg Ham hung around.
Maybe no. Who knows? Maybe they were the assholes. Maybe they were the ones that were like, "We don't need you."
Yeah, who knows?
Or just, it doesn't seem that way. That kind of a thing, an attitude. Sometimes I don't know if substance abuse becomes an issue, or
Colin Hay seems like the Ethan Hunt in this thing of Mission Impossible. Is we had a mole hunt, and you're the only one alive.
Yeah,
the mole is deep.
Interesting point.
Right? So, I mean, he's the only guy left in the band. So you'd have to say, well,
yeah,
it had to have been him. And again, that's just my speculation, but it's a travesty because this album is so damn good for a debut. It's almost criminally too good now. Like, I'm going hard on this though. I'm going hard on the love for this album because it hit me. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Listen, I took it for granted. I'm like, yeah, we're going to do Men at Work. great debut album, great historical significance, Australian, da da da, ba ba ba.
Yeah.
First Australian band to have a number one album and a number one single in the United States. So there's a lot of records that these guys were breaking. So I thought, yeah, this is going to be like wiffle ball. This is going to be like,
Mm-hmm.
and when I listened to it, I'm like, Jesus, like what, like, hello, gorgeous, where have you been? Like I didn't, the 82 kid in me, and not that I haven't listened to it since then, but again, when we do these episodes, I really like listen, and I'm opening, I'm trying to have myself open to things that I haven't heard before, or I'm not necessarily looking for it, but I'm just kind of a little less in the zone of just going through the motions of putting it on. Yeah, I know this song. So, and it really hit me.
Yeah, same here.
It really hit me, the appreciation for,
it's like hearing it for the first time. For me,
it really was. For you, it was. For you, it literally was.
It literally was.
It was. I'm honestly, this album really had a weird effect on me in that I haven't stopped listening to it. So I put it on Friday. I'm like, I'm going to get my 2 listens in.
Mm-hmm.
And by the second listen, I'm like, I gotta listen to this again, because I think there's even more.
Yeah. And
there was. It's just like you for the person that's listening to it for the first time, they may get that. I think they might get that.
Mm-hmm.
For someone that listened to it so long ago, and the people that kind of take it for granted, like that's why I like watching reaction videos of people hearing songs for the first time, or watching, because you're almost vicariously get to re-experience it like that. Yep. And I think if you haven't listened to Men at Work Business as Usual, let us know. Reach out to us on social media. Let me know if I'm off, or was this I don't think this was an 80s throwaway, because
no,
like
not
I said,
at all.
The quirky stuff betrays what else is in the grooves.
Yeah, not at all. No, I would fight anybody who says otherwise. I think
I'll kick ass. I'll get Mark Wahlberg to back me up.
But isn't it great though? Isn't it such a pleasure to have something that is worth, and not just for nostalgia's sake. It's just for when you literally can hear something, it still has value. It holds up.
This sounds fresh to me.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, like when I listen to it, I'm like, this could battle with some pop rock of today. Like it's there, it doesn't, it's not like Spandau Ballet, like True, or like those songs that are so like entrenched in the 80s.
Yeah,
this album,
orchestral maneuvers in the dark,
this doesn't have that kind of pedigree. It's more akin to maybe like Huey Lewis and New Sports, right? That was an 80s album that kind of was in the 80s, but could have existed in other times as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one more so. I think this one really kind of can transcend some time. It's not a lot. There's not a lot of dated stuff. Just maybe the Helpless Automaton song is certainly the quirky. We need to have songs about the future and computer. Like that was the thing in the early 80s, right? It's like we need to have a song about a computer, or we need to have a song about technology.
Mm-hmm. Which I don't really hear anybody doing today, as far as, especially with all this AI.
They're promoting the technology. They're saying, why do we have so much technology?
That's right. Well, be careful what you wish for.
or Kip Dynamite singing about it.
It's prophetic, is what it is. Yeah,
very, very much so. The interesting thing about this album is, this was, we said in November, it was released in Australia by the CBS or Columbia arm in Australia, and it went to number 1. So, CBS or Columbia Australia said to, the parent company, hey, can we get this released worldwide? United States market, it hit number 1. They're like, no, we'll pass. We're good. They had to. It was rejected twice.
Wow.
By CBS parent company before the third time they said, okay, we'll do it. 6 million copies later.
Wow.
Rejected twice by CBS, International or whatever they are, by the Australia. This was like the number 1. This was like a big deal in Australia, but and with the same singles with Down Under and Who Can It Be Now? So
crazy.
Yeah, really, really strange. You know what Colin Hay? You know what Colin Hay does now, right?
I do not. What does he do now?
He's part of Ringo's All Stars.
Okay.
Yeah, he tours with Ringo.
Well, a lot of people do.
So he gets
A lot of people
who hasn't? I think you and I are the only ones that haven't toured with Ringo. I'll hold the tambourine while he sings. I'll hold the tambourine while he sings "It Don't Come Easy." I mean, I'll do that.
Yeah, I'll have
Or
the shaker.
Octopus's Garden, you know. Yeah, they have those guys. What do those guys do? Like the shaker guy, you know, or the guy that holds the little egg.
Hey, man,
that's not even a shaker. The egg. I'm sorry to the egg shaker people out there.
Hey, I've played it.
Shake the egg
once or twice.
Put me on stage. I'll shake the egg.
It's not as easy as you think.
It's easy. It's a fucking egg. It's an egg with pebbles in it. I'll shake it. So yeah, he tours with Ringo. I think yeah, it's a rotating thing, but now it's usually like him, Greg Raleigh from Journey.
Mm-hmm.
What's his face? Steve Lukather from Toto. So they have a nice, and then I should really go see Ringo. I think you saw him, right? Didn't you see the All Stars at one point? You never saw Ringo?
I did not. Andy did. Our friend Andy did.
Andy Cremines? Yeah, I think I should see them before it's too late. We saw Paul.
The thing I saw was the Hendrix Experience with all the with Dweezil Zappa and dudes from Hendrix band.
I think Ringo needs to be seen, because he's still doing it, and it's like, okay, you know what? I don't want to regret it afterwards that Ringo tours incessantly and I never went. That would be just dumb of me. So.
Would be nice
Colin Hay is kind of doing that. He did kind of drag back the Men at Work name with Greg Ham a little bit, but then everybody else was there was never a real reunion per se.
Yeah, now I mean and then when he died, there was he hired a whole bunch of new musicians, which obviously probably didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, and then
under the banner because he couldn't get that solo career,
And then in a sad footnote. And this might tie up our theories about who was the instigator for the breakup of Men at Work. In 2009, Ron Streicher, the guitarist, was arrested for making death threats against Colin Hay.
Okay.
So I'm gonna fucking kill you.
What could he have done?
Probably animosity, right? There's probably some anger and animosity, or maybe I don't know if in 2010 he was touring as Men at Work.
Wow,
and maybe it's like, you're using the name, and like I said, it was like that. Men at Work almost seemed like the Three Musketeers, right? Like that's the way they seemed. Like it was a group of guys. They were quirky, they were strange, they made these weird music videos, but they were all in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed like that one for all and all for one type attitude.
Yeah.
Even though they weren't brand names and these guys weren't big names, but you knew back in the 80s, you knew Men at Work. Those videos were always on MTV.
Yeah.
They were like a staple. So it's kind of, I could see where the band members would
maybe be. Just to play devil's advocate here a little bit, perhaps maybe Colin Hayes saw something in the band that perhaps maybe they were just sitting back on some laurels there. Maybe, we're coasted on the hits. We like this quirky thing. Maybe he saw that there was more value in some of the deeper cuts on the album. And I think we should, perhaps pursue a more.
So here's my question. Here's my question to that then. How'd that work out?
Well,
how'd that work out for Colin Hay?
Yeah, I'm just saying. It's like, but as we're commenting on how brilliant the album is, maybe he saw that himself and said, I don't want to just do songs like Down Under. Let's do this. And they're like, no, we want to do this, kind of thing. It's possible. Who knows?
Can't find anything about it.
Yeah.
So it's either a well-kept secret or a series of events. Maybe it just was a series of events. But if you're telling your bass player and your drummer that your services are no longer needed, that's not them leaving. That's not them saying, oh, I'm quitting. I've had enough of the road. So I don't know. It's strange.
It always baffled me anyway when a band, especially when a band has the the credit of being like co-founder, right? And then somebody has the right to turn around and say you're out of the band.
That's exactly what happened. Is because Colin Hay and Ron Stryker were a duo before Men at Work.
Yeah,
and then they got Greg Ham in as the third guy to form Men at Work, and then Reeves and Spicer were the last two in. But Ron Stryker, and maybe that's the thing. Ron Stryker probably has much of a claim as anybody. He's the guitar player.
Mm-hmm.
There's great guitar work on this album.
Yeah,
like again, it's not just like these guys are kind of in the background. This instrumentation, the saxophone stuff,
it's tight.
All this stuff is front and center.
It's tight, and when you can listen to something that when the whole band shines,
that's what this album is. It's like a showcase
mix,
for the album,
as it were.
For the
They stand out, and that mix is just right, and you hear every aspect, everything everybody's doing.
Yeah, and Colin Hay's a part of that. Like his voice is a part of that whole audio picture that you're getting, but it's also the band members. Like I said, like on songs like Underground, it's got some sax in the beginning, but then there's sax that kind of weaves in and out through the song.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of brilliant stuff. And like that song, People Just Love to Play with Words. You have like these like backing vocals that kind of come in and come in and out. It's just really brilliant stuff. And I can't think that wasn't a group effort, but again, obviously someone's got to be the leader. But you do, don't do him dirty like that. There's enough of the pie. Again, he could have continued Men at Work and then done solo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, back then, a lot of people weren't thinking that way.
Mm.
It was kind of unheard of to do that. Like I said, Phil Collins had just done it right around that time. Face Value came out, and it was kind of unheard of that. Like Robert Plant never made a solo album while he was in Led Zeppelin.
Mm-hmm.
Paul McCartney never, or John Lennon never made, they did maybe one or two one-off solo things, but the notion of a solo song or a solo album was kind of an outlier back then. Now it's almost like, I've got my band.
What's more, what's worse when you're in a band for so long that you're starting to feel creatively stifled, or, because things are not going, like in the case of George Harrison. Let's put, like he had to stockpile his stuff because it just wasn't getting played and it was getting rejected. And he had, so you have that, or do you have somebody who's just right out the gate in this case, or maybe, it was the 80s. The 80s was the era of excess too. It was like, we're stars because we have a hit, and boom, you think you're going to do. I think that's what happened with Sting. I mean, he became like a,
But Sting was right. I mean, Sting was able to parlay that into a successful solo career, right?
Yeah.
Phil Collins kind of tread the line. He balanced on that thread as long as he could between Genesis and solo stuff. Sting just cut it off, and his stuff was different than the Police, and people still came for it. They still, they went along on that journey.
There is something to be said of people stepping away, having to fulfill those creative juices, as it were, but then coming back to the band inspired again, fresh.
And he could have done that,
and perhaps do something new or try a different approach. Yeah.
And I'm sure Men at Work would have been waiting. Yeah, and that's what I equate these guys to. Like the Heartbreakers are essentially nameless and faceless, but they're like the stalwarts of Tom Petty. Like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers would not be that band without those guys always in it. Right? There was only one main lineup change, when Howie Epstein came in, but for the most part, it was like that all for one for all attitude until they started to crumble later on. But they got a lot of mileage out of the Heartbreakers, and I, when I was listening to Men at Work, I was thinking of like, why couldn't this have been the same type of thing, where Colin Hay led Men at Work, but this was the band, like this was, it could be Colin Hay's Men at Work, or he could be the leader, but with 3 albums, it's a travesty. Oops, sorry.
Personally, I didn't even know they made a third album, to be honest.
It was called Two Hearts. It had like one.
I mean, I knew Cargo.
Everybody knew Cargo. It had like one hit, if it was a hit. By then it was kind of I think they were trying to keep up with the times. Two Hearts had Everything I Need, and the Man with Two Hearts. But it didn't do anything. It didn't even it charted number 50. So Business as Usual hit number 1. Cargo was like number 2 or 3. Two Hearts, the bloom was off the rose. They had lost something had gotten lost somewhere.
Yeah.
You know? But back to Business as Usual. It's just
success came too quick, perhaps. Maybe
I don't know.
Did they reach their peak right out the gate?
You know what?
There's something that's happened.
If so, I'm glad we have this. I'm glad we have this exquisite album. And I can't advocate enough. Like, you guys got to go on Spotify and listen to this thing. You know, and I might be overblowing. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? But I don't know. Something hit me about the re-listen to this, which sometimes it happens when we've reconvened, and I said, oh wow, I didn't hear this, but for some reason this one really hit me hard. I'm like, wow, these guys really didn't get the notoriety as a band that they should have, you know, and it was because of these quirky because of Down Under, this novelty song. That's not what this album isn't full of like Down Under style knockoff songs, you know.
No.
Those are that and Who Could It Be Now are kind of the outliers. Those are like the quirky songs, but there's a solid pop rock album underneath there that I really dig listening to. I'm probably gonna listen to it again. Like even after the episode, I'm like, wow, this, you know.
Well, hopefully people will too. So your comments are well, you know,
it's
we'd
definitely
like to
a Homer
hear from
episode.
you.
This is a Homer episode. We don't have too many of them where we just kind of we haven't gushed in a while. I haven't gushed in a while. But this is one of them, and hopefully everybody will feel the same. This is kind of a lost. You know what it is? Kind of a lost treasure for me, because I have it on vinyl. Obviously, I'm holding it up here. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'm holding. I have it on vinyl. I bought it, and then I just pulled it out and listened to it. I'm like, you know, I listened to it on Spotify
you bought
all
it
week.
because it was that album from the '80s that
it had that. I bought it for the sentimental value of like I need to have this in my collection. Yeah, I need to have it. Without giving it the deep dive, you just buy it. Yeah, you know, it's like you kind of buy it and you put it on the shelf, like buy Men at Work and put it on the shelf because I want it in my collection. But now I'm glad I have it in my collection, which is different. You know, now it kind of now has almost like I was sitting on my recliner and I was looking at my stereo and the album was kind of peeking out, like I could see it. You know, because you know how when you put albums away and sometimes all the spines aren't level, so one might be peeking out a little more, and it was peeking out about 3 hours ago, and I'm like, it's looking at me. I'm like, play me. You know, I was like Ray Liotta and Coppola. I was like, will you shut up? Like it was
hearing voices in your head.
Yeah, it was just a little, just because this is a very distinctive. It's very yellow. Oh, this album is very yellow. So when it's
Metallica used that color scheme in their latest record, right? That yellow and black. It's very stark.
So when it's on the shelf and peeking out, it really sticks out because it's very yellow. And I'm like, God, I'm like, it's right there. And I think I listened to it twice today already. I'm like, I pulled it out. I got to put the vinyl on. I was I had to.
What is that Big Bad? A Big Bang Theory with Spock. There's the Mego Spock doll. Yeah. And Leonard Nimoy actually voiced the doll, and he's like talking to. It's like, you know, it's not logical. You know, like
it was
Colin A. You know, peeking out like, you know.
Yeah, it was definitely like sticking out for a reason. I'm like, I gotta pull it out. So I pulled it out and gave it another listen. And you know what? I don't mind it. It's not that I ever minded it, but again, I've got a new appreciation for it. So for me, this was a valuable episode. If I'm going to be selfish, this was a valuable episode for me because I really got to reappreciate.
Well, so did I.
Yeah, and I sprung it on Eric and didn't know. He didn't say anything. He's a trooper. He didn't say anything to me.
Oh.
Like,
I'll listen to anything, man. We'll talk about anything.
Okay.
I mean,
next week, Jim Stafford's greatest hits: Spiders and Snakes to My Girl Bill.
Oh goodness! Was it friggin' Convoy? Right? What's
W. McCall?
W. McCall. That's right. C.W. McCall.
Breaker 19. I'll listen to anything. I'm still gonna listen. If it comes up, I'm not turning off Convoy. So we got to do something. You know what? We have to do a. I don't know if we could do a top 5 novelty songs, but we need to do something about novel. Like the 70s was like the era of like the novelty song.
Oh yes.
I mean, even the 50s and 60s, but when we were growing up in the 70s, it was still those novelty songs.
Yeah.
Like Disco Duck and those strange songs that would become a hit.
I always wondered why that was not on the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack.
Disco Duck.
It's in the movie.
It's rated R. I think that would have seemed out of place.
Well,
because there's like serious music. We did the episode on it, but
it's
serious disco. Like on Saturday Night Fever soundtrack, there's serious disco. Like it's real, like right. It's like serious music. It's like I think Disco Duck would throw off the groove if you're listening to that soundtrack. You're really getting into like the.
Well, Boogie Shoes, I think, kind of almost comes to the line of, it's a great song, of course, but I mean, come on.
Listen, KC can do no wrong in my book.
Hey, I'm up for an episode. Do that.
We could do a KC and the Sunshine Band. That would be a retrospective episode.
Yeah.
Ending with Give It Up.
There you go. There it is.
his last big hit. So I think that's going to do it. This was just a
pleasure.
Yeah, it really was. This really did have an effect on me in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't wait to do the episode. The more I was listening to it, I'm like, wow, this is like, I was like chomping at the bit because I really wanted to like talk about it. And again, 38 minutes. It clocks in 38 minutes, and 6 minutes of that is
easy
one
listen.
song. So the rest of the album is like 32 minutes.
Very easy listen.
You get in and get out, and that's the great thing about good pop music is you don't realize it, right? And that's why they were called pop songs back in the day were called 2-minute miracles, because you were able to get in and get out and leave the listener with something memorable. And that's probably why I love pop music so much, is because it does what it needs to do in a small wrapper economically, which isn't always easy to do, but. And Men at Work, Business as Usual does it, but there's a lot of rock elements there.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a harder edge on it, which I appreciated to this, and that I think that's why it separates it from the rest of the '80s stuff, because it wasn't the glossy, really poppy pop like Take on Me and that kind of stuff. It was a little bit before that, so it had its roots a little bit probably closer to some rock stuff.
Yeah,
with pop/rock.
So just the right amount of polish to it, but yeah, you do get those
not overproduced.
Those very analog instruments. Which I always
produced more like a rock album than a pop.
Oh, come
album.
on! I always anything with flutes, horns, anything like that, man. I'm down.
Flutes and horns. Well, we did the Chicago episode already.
We did.
So we got the flutes and horns covered.
We did.
Yeah, we did. So
so.
Unless we do Anchorman, because that has jazz flute in it. Ron Burgundy plays the flute.
Little Jethro Tull.
I don't know if I could do a Tull episode. I'm not sure.
Aqualung is a classic.
Aqualung and Teacher. I mean, they have a handful of good songs, but that's a little too. That might be a little too esoteric for our audience as well. Tull. Songs from the wood.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they won, oddly enough, the Grammy for Best Heavy Metal Album. So go figure.
Okay.
They beat Metallica. They beat Metallica. The first year there was a Grammy award for a heavy metal album.
Never pegged them as a heavy metal group, but
Jethro Tull beat Metallica.
Okay.
Yeah, the Grammys didn't know what they were doing.
No, they never do.
And I think the year that Metallica won, I think they thanked Jethro Tull for not putting out an album that year. I'm serious.
Yeah.
I think they tongue-in-cheekily said, well, our thanks to Jethro Tull for not putting out an album, so we didn't have to go against them, because they were, like really, really kind of sticking it to the Grammys that you guys don't know. Like, that's not metal. They're not even close to metal.
No.
They're not even they're not even in the how the saying, like, right church, wrong pew.
Yeah.
They're not even the same religion. Forget about the church and pew. You're not even like close to that.
Right.
Anyway,
yeah,
that's I think we have a quick hit about that anyway, if you want to see more. So definitely check out Men at Work, 1982 for United States. 3 great hit singles, but
the album's better.
The good stuff is underneath. Yeah, it really is. And I rarely say that. Eric, Eric likes the deep cuts, but this one is just as Jafar would say, a diamond in the rough.
There had to be an impression somewhere.
I had to get it in. I can't. There's no Men at Work impression, so I had to bring something from the outside in. But definitely go check it out. Hit us up on social media. Let me know if I'm absolutely out of my gourd and I need to shut up about Men at Work, or I might be onto something. And if you're on YouTube, if you're with us this long, go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button too. That would be great. And this way you get notifications when new episodes come out. So for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will see you. I get it mixed up now, dude. I'm like losing my mind. I'm so you know what? We've done so many movie episodes recently that I know. Be Kind Rewind, asking you to,
We'll see you on the flip side.
You said it.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.